Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Boz here live on Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday night. I am happy to see so many of you here on the channel with me. I would love for you to tell me where you're from in that chat. I got to know a lot of you last week when probably the highest number of comments I've ever seen on one of our lives came in because you had a very strong opinion about me declining an invitation to go to the inaugural celebration, specifically the one with RFK Jr. And I've spent a lot of time trying to get back to folks that are all across the country and across the globe. I'm seeing now some of the folks, Prescott, Arizona. My oldest son's name is Prescott, so that means a lot to us. But I've spent a lot of time reading through those comments and really hearing the underlying tone about how frustrated many of you are that I wouldn't want to grab the ear of a policymaker for our country to say, well, what would I do to make America healthy again? And what would I tell RFK Jr.? So I'm going to use this show tonight to tell you some of that because I do think it is not something I covered last week. I am certain that with the change in what the country is about to do, that it is going to be a very, hopefully influential, but impactful administration and policymakers for America. And I have some strong opinions on how to make America healthy again. We're going to go through those tonight. I want to clarify a couple of things because it was a little unsettling to see that many of you felt that I wasn't very patriotic by saying no. And I want to clarify, I am from the heartland where I grew up in a small town of 800 people that if you didn't, run for office or help the person run for office, well, I mean, you really could see that the character behind the policymaker mattered. I have a strong commitment that as citizens of our cities, of our communities, that we were founded to say, the people who run the country shouldn't be a bunch of lawyers. It shouldn't be saying, I'm going to go be great at political science and then run for government. It should be the people who are on the front lines of running businesses, helping patients, in my case, being a servant to your profession. And what that teaches you is what we're going to go through tonight. What I've learned as a frontline servant for especially patients on the margins. And what I mean by that are we depend on these policies and the government to have rules about how we help people that are marginalized. I'm talking about those in jail. I'm talking about those that are in a nursing home. I'm talking about those that fall off the cliff and need help from the rest of the community. And when the policymakers haven't ever met those people, maybe they've never loved or suffered with or journeyed with those people, there's flaws in their policies. So they need citizens. They need us to either run for office or at least lend our expertise, our pain and suffering from policies gone wrong and how the next generation could be. So again, thank you very much for telling us where you're from. I love to see folks across the Midwest here joining us. But we're going to get over to this conversation. And I just want to see a thumbs up if you did watch last week's live and a thumbs down. As I see those come in, it will help me make sure to touch some of the things that I wasn't planning on talking about tonight. If there's a lot of thumbs down, meaning people haven't watched the live from last week, it will help me. So give me a little bit of your help. Let's get over to these stories that I want to tell you about. So yeah, what would I say to RFK Jr. If I got his ear? And that is, he does have a great conversation with these topics that I do think deserve more attention than they've been given. Industry's kept some of them muted, kind of hidden under a bushel basket. High fructose corn syrup has been bastardized in plenty of ways, but it's still in everything. Seed oils and food dyes and fluoride, they deserve these conversations. I do believe that JFK has had many of the things done right. And what I want to show are what it looks like when you've had successes. And I am so thankful for the patients that have taught me by getting better. And yet the failures have taught me just as much. And I've picked out a few of them over the last 5 to 6 years that I'm going to share with you. And this would be what I would want to make sure is in the policy for making America healthy again. So let's start with this picture. This is a picture of a 79-year-old woman. Her name is Vicki, and Vicki does not need to lose weight. This picture is about 5 years ago when she had been doing several things that she thought were right. In fact, there would be a lot of things that RFK would say, this is all you need to do. She'd cut out the seed oils. She didn't use high fructose corn syrup. She had a good sleep routine, and she ate low carb. And she found me online and, learned about what I think is a higher metabolic challenge for people who've had autoimmune disorders. What she has on her back there, that red, almost bloody back, is because of a skin disorder that's kind of like psoriasis. The body's attacking it, and it is a product of her immune system gone funky, gone awry. It's doing the wrong thing. It's attacking her. And yes, there are many medications. Vicki has great insurance. Almost, my husband would say that the best way to kill somebody in today's health services is to give them too good of insurance. So she almost had too good of insurance. She could get any surgery she wanted, any medication she wanted. And yet there was some wisdom in Vicki where she said, I'm going to try this low carb. So she did low carb before she met us and had maybe a little bit of improvement, but was still suffering. She watches the online course and she said, I just did everything you said to do. And within a short time, I'm talking 6 weeks, that red back, which had been steroid ridden, the immunomodulators that can change how the white blood cells attack the body, which also weaken your immune system. I don't actually think she went on one of those at that time, but that was on the table. That was next in the treatment line from her doctors. And the picture on the right is where it was completely cleared up. And then Vicki did what many people do. She says, I was better. I felt great. And she said, I can have dessert once in a while. Salads are for everybody. Everybody eats salad. That's healthy, right? And then she also said things like, I live in Texas, where the best Mexican food has ever been combined with Texans making Mexican food. And this was at least on the menu once a week because that was her weakness. And the longer that went on, her brain got foggy again. The rash would kind of come back. She could feel it coming back. And there are other problems that this disorder happens. The picture just depicts how inflammatory it really was. And my biggest moment was when she said, I'm going to invest in our advanced course called the 21 Day. And she said, it wasn't just a reset. It was a habit changer. That was in 2022. And she still, on her own, meets with 5 people that took this class in 2022 because she says, we check numbers, we follow the numbers because that's how I stay out of a remission. And I know that I couldn't have got there with the traditional approach with medicine. I mean, that was headed for, she would have been crippled with a broken hip by this point because steroids are a big part of that treatment plan. But what she does do is volunteers in her community. She actually serves on the election boards for local, state, and federal when they come around. But she has 4 grandkids she keeps up with. And the life that she gets to live is because of this advanced education that I contend somebody needs to be teaching the country. All right, this story is another one of my favorites. And I call it a success, but Dale died 2 years ago. So Dale was one of the first also one of the folks who said, I do everything my doctor says. I do eat pretty healthy. His wife confirmed that he eats pretty healthy. And if you were looking at JFK's or RFK's, list, does he do it right? He does pretty much all of those things right. But his metabolism had changed to the point where that tummy, he called himself the blueberry because he just had this round tummy like a blueberry. He took this advanced lesson in a ketogenic diet and reversed it. Not only reversed it, but went back to doing what he was supposed to do, which is be the best grandpa ever. And on the day he died, the day before he died, his wife wrote in and said, I saw your email talking about Dale, and I just need you to tell you that he died. And the day before he died, we were planning on coming down to that support group in the bowling alley that you have, because he wanted to meet you and say how thankful he was for this education he couldn't find anywhere else, that he was living his best life. He was happy and vibrant until the day he died. And he actually drove an Uber in his retirement, and he said, I have this captive audience, and I'm evangelizing the ketogenic diet to anybody that will let me tell them. And I contend his success story continues even in his death. So I do that to not only honor him, but say, yeah, he taught me that, again, you don't need a lot from me, but you do need the education. All right, this story is actually so profound, I need to be careful not to screw it up. So this woman, Melody, writes in and joined our class in January of 2024, a year ago. But in January of 2023, she had uterine cancer with 22 tumors. These tumors were from a ½ inch in diameter to 3 inches in diameter, all across her body. And the doctor says, you've got 3 months. 3 months to live. I mean, I really don't think you can underestimate how important that 3-month sentence is. When I give that to patients, well, they look a certain way. I mean, and when Melody came into the class last year in January of 2024, she did look like she had a short life expectancy. So what happened was she went through the class, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to screw it up. January of 2024, she'd been using the ketogenic diet for a year. She had taken, read the online book, used the books and read the online course. I had a full body scan last week, and my cancer status has drastically improved due to the use of a ketogenic diet, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, and an infrared sauna. I have one elongated tumor that's a ½ inch, and I have 17 hot spots, where they can't see a cancer. They can just detect that the metabolism at a cellular level is hot, usually meaning there's probably a cancer there, but we can't see it. What a great improvement, right? So from 22 big sized, you can't miss it, you don't need to be a radiologist to see those cancers, to this. So she says, I'm doubling down. I'm going to do this till I die. All right. And then just this week, she writes in and says, my scan from yesterday shows that there is one hot spot. Again, a hot spot is the place where you can't see the definition. It gives me goosebumps to say this story out loud. There is one hot spot where the tumor was last year. I have no signs where they can see a cancer, and I am so thankful. The Lord has answered our prayers, and I just, this lease on life is a testimony. I can remember teaching her. She was one of the first people that I taught that, and I got this from one of the journals, that some of the cancer metabolism clinics were trying to use roasted mealworms as a snack. If anybody was in the class when I taught that, because I think it was only a small handful, put it in the chat that were you there when I said, here's what toasted mealworms look like. And I tasted them. They're not bad. They really weren't bad, but they're super high in fat and they're high in protein, but they're crunchy and they just were very unique. But I remember thinking, wow, she said, I'll try it. But what you see here is something that healthy food wasn't going to do that. Look at what you can do when you push a metabolic level. You stimulate metabolism with ketogenic diet and a sauna. In her case, adding that hyperbaric oxygen chamber, I think, was very critical. And we went through that. We taught her that in class. Okay, next I want to tell you about Larry. So Larry has actually been one of our coaches, but when he started out, he was the perfect retired Floridian engineer. He had said, I'm leaving you guys as winners. I'm headed down to the place where folks golf for a living, and I am going to do this. And he He did. He golfed more than he did anything else. But he was 100 pounds overweight. And this is despite in 2015 having a triple bypass. Maybe it was I can't remember, 3 or 4 bypass to his heart. So he finds our channel and says, all right, this isn't working for me. And he loses a bunch of weight. He then becomes really involved in the community enough that we said, well, come be part of our team and coach some students. And again, a really informative time of his life where he took his metabolism to the next level. But like with many people on not just a ketogenic diet, but who've had metabolic issues for decades, in 2023, he had another surgery, an open abdominal bypass surgery that, I mean, it set him back. His brain took a hit just because everybody's does when you have surgery, and he was able to get out of surgery, but then, just the season afterwards left him depressed. And he was really like, I thought if I did this ketogenic diet that I was going to be fine. I thought that if I had delivered ketones regularly to my body and I'd lost all this weight and I had all this energy, then what the hell happened that that I still had a blockage happen in my body? And as much as that sounds like it was false advertising, it is not. That this is a failure that is real, but a success in his story, meaning he was going to have a problem with that blockage somewhere. Reversing the demand, improving his metabolism, reversing the rate, reversing some of the damage through autophagy, but also slowing the rate of any other blockage. Really, I mean, he was like, I don't know if I can trust that this is going to help me again. And in that time, he actually said, for as poor as my health got, it was never what it was after the triple bypass. But he also did something I see over and over again, which is when people's health scares them, their faith grows. And he'd not been, he'd, been to the church, but really not really poured into his faith much. So he said, I worked on that. And now I find that even just a few weeks into a ketogenic state again, that the depression is away. He's actually down 30 pounds of the 60 pounds that he gained after that surgery. And he's really hopeful for the first time in probably his life to have not only his spiritual growth that's happened during this touch of death, but to have the knowledge that he knows exactly how to stimulate his metabolism. And there's a foundation in the relationships he has in his life that I think, I can't wait to see what his update is in 1 year. Larry is really special. He is one of a kind. And if you've met him, he did help a lot of people. And he's got that authoritative engineering brain that I love. Some students didn't love. All right. So here's exactly what I would be showing RFK. What he is noticing is that when you add healthy eating to people's lives, here's the beginning stage. They'll eat 3 meals a day. And notice how that blood sugar got up to about 150. That's that chart on the part on the left side of that graph. And this is not uncommon for folks 50, 60, 70 years old. 3 meals a day is okay. And when you first do that, when you first change that behavior, you will see they'll make ketones. They ignite a metabolic improvement in the first several weeks, probably 6 to 8 weeks when they take that on. And by golly, they feel great. But this is what happens next. That the ketones settle down as their body adapts. It gets used to it. And we've seen this happen over and over again. And we say, okay, so here's what you do next is you take 2 meals a day and only eating twice a day. We do let them have a fat in their coffee at the beginning of the day. And when they do that, they restore the ketones. Not quite as high as what the ketones were when they first, kick their metabolism into gear. But they do have and you can see this. RFK's plan is, yes, they eat healthy and then they add exercise. And so if they do that, they boost their ketones like this. They stimulate their metabolism. But what happens next is the human body does this. It adapts, and those ketones sink. And then we say, all right, now we got to push you again. So we push them to take that eating window, and instead of having 12 hours of eating in a day, we want you only eating 8 hours a day. From beginning to the end of eating, one first calorie to last calorie is 8 hours. And then we slide it towards sunrise. And by golly, we do get a really good stimulus of their metabolism. I don't think this is a guess. You really do need to measure this to see it. And we see people do it for a long period of time, and then they stall. And much like what happened with Larry, and this morning at the Pin Chasers, we had several good testimonies of people who said, yeah, and then I stalled. I was eating healthy, and then I stalled. I was doing several of these. I got rid of seed oils, got rid of red dye. I took high fructose corn syrup away and added cane sugar, whatever thing that they made the change. The stall is where I think the biggest gap in education happens, because people say it stopped working. Okay, no, your body's metabolism adjusted, and in order to do the next step, you need to understand why the heck it did it in the first place. And it's in that critical moment that, well, we do some other teaching. Let me just finish. There's like 2 more slides left, and then I'll I talk about how if you just ate sardines for 3 days, you really would change your metabolism. So here these people are eating 2 times a day, and you'll notice the blood sugars are pretty dang good. That by the time they get to the, that second day, their Dr. Boz ratio, which means glucose divided by ketones, is 150. I don't usually see autoimmune problems or autophagy happening at that level. So if Larry was going to reverse those blood vessels, he at least needs to get the number down into the 50s. So the second day of a sardine challenge, I see it get into the 90s. That's not uncommon. And this is even for the most insulin resistant patient. By the third day, we really turn on a whole bunch of new mitochondria. This is where mitophagy happens. And that blood sugar is mighty low. The ketones are above 1.5 usually. And they really do spark some repair process to their bodies. The next thing we teach them, though, is, all right, now take it even higher. And these numbers aren't just an estimate, but we see, Dr. Boz ratio 120, that ketones, Dr. Boz ratio in the 90s the next day, and then getting even lower to 42 on the third day of water only, 72 hours of salt water, black coffee only. I don't ask people to do this at the beginning, and some people I never ask to do this because they don't need it. They would be perfect on RFK's plan. But there are people throughout this community that have taught me that when they stall, there's some things I should keep learning and I should keep teaching. And I know that without the help of them teaching me, we wouldn't get anywhere close to what I've learned in the last three years. This will be class number 6 that we're going to have, that will start on January 27th. It will go for 21 days. And it's from, it is interactive. I meet every student. I hear all of their problems. I really do try to educate through where they're stuck. And it's taught me that the policymakers of the country need to listen to RFK. And he's got a lot of things he's doing right. But the next level is to teach a level of metabolism that I don't see being taught anywhere else. So yeah, I was saying he talks about fluoride vaccines, food dyes, seed oils, and he said just eat healthy. That's what he thinks the answer is. And in many ways, that gets you far into this game, right? But when so we were at Hack Your Health in I think June of 2022. This was an event that's in Austin, Texas. My whole team has come in, and we're, teaching people about the Dr. Boz ratio. So we're, checking blood sugars and teaching them. And we meet in this hotel room, and I say, I have this idea. And this is what policy makers need to hear. The frontline people who have an idea that they've tested, that they've played out. The first class, I said, we might do one of these fail miserably, and never do it again. I did not expect to learn that you don't need, no insurance company covers you coming into a doctor on a Zoom call for 3 weeks to be educated. That's not covered by insurance. But it is the most powerful transformations I've seen. The first class, God bless you, we made a few mistakes. We didn't do things as well as I think we could have. But the second, third, fourth, and fifth class have been an exponential improvement in how we teach this, how we send you off with a support system around you. And I have a rule that I will not see a patient who has not been through this class, because you don't need me. You do not need, you can go back. Most of the students have gone back and taught their doctor more about what happens in metabolism, how to reverse their health problems, and how to teach their neighbors, teach their spouses, teach their children what it looks like to reverse health problems. And I contend that as I look to this next layer of learning, last week I talked a little bit about this. On Friday, I put out a video of just some of the things that have me so inspired for the next season of medicine, because just like when the ketogenic diet first came out, I whispered about it. I took care of it in my, independent clinic. I'm not in an institution anymore where they regulate what I can tell patients, but there's isolation there. I can be wrong. When I was first seeing the ketogenic diet and I had people reversing their thyroid problems, I thought, where the heck is that in the textbook? That's not written anywhere. I don't know why that's happening. And the first few times I think it's like fake. Like, I don't know, it's a fluke. I don't know what to tell you. And then one after another of these autoimmune problems, the problems that said you need to be on an immune modulator, you need to screw up your white blood cells from now until the time you hop in the grave, and it's going to be a crappy death, because what happens when I put those medicines in your body is it changes the depth of what your immune system can do. It just can sprinkle on your body. It can't really repair your body. And as I found my people, I found the people who said, yes, we're studying this, we've looked at this, here's what the animal studies are. I became more confident, more boisterous about sharing what was happening with my partners, with my colleagues, with people on YouTube. And as I look at what I learned over the last year, I whispered about it for the longest time. But there are some things that RFK says that I think he's wrong. Let's go back to them. So here's this image. So this picture is something I drew, or my team and I drew, for trying to explain how many ways the gut talks to the brain. How many different ways satiety shows up in my patients, in your bodies, in our bodies. And when you look at the different, I'm just going to read them out loud. Leptin, adiponectin, ghrelin, the pancreatic peptides, insulin, peptide YY, oxyntomodulin. I don't ever say that one out loud, actually. Cholecystokinin. And then the two on the outsides are the GLP-1s and the GIPs. Again, these hormones do amazing things to what I'm seeing on the front lines. It's not a place where you should brush them off and say, no, you should never take a medication in the world of medicine. That I contend that by the end of this 21 day, I will know because I get to know these students so well, who I would recommend one of these incretins. These hormones that we're talking about are called incretins in their bodies. So let me tell you what the difference would be. So take Larry. So Larry, he knew how to do a ketogenic diet. His metabolism had been really crappy, enough to put 100 pounds of mass on his body. And then he knew everything there was to know. He could teach me about the ketogenic diet. But his setback led to a brain that got really depressed, whether that's from the anesthesia or when he was in rehab and in the hospital, the carbs were easier and they were comforting, whatever. His brain got sad, depressed. And that's the thing. When you look at what we could have done for him we could have said, if you just get back on the bandwagon for the ketogenic diet and let me give you a microdose of some of these hormones. Because in Larry's brain, there should be listening receptors for GIP and GLP-1. It's a neuroendocrine communication. And when he's gone so long without making these hormones that he doesn't ever feel full, he doesn't ever feel satisfied, that the receptors that go to listen for these hormones, well, they go away. Now, if you put the hormone back in their body, the receptors become awake again. And eventually his body will make them again. It's not that he can't, it's that the stimulus to do it is broken. And even the smallest amount of them, I contend that I don't think just GLP-1s will do this. And I personally don't think that GLP-1 plus the GIP, which is what Mounjaro or Zeptide are, I don't think those are going to make this criteria. But the ones that will come out in the next 2 years, what we call a triple effective peptide, affecting GLP-1s, affecting GIPs, and affecting that glycogen agonist, you will find neuromodulation is what we're seeing. And I've been whispering this to colleagues saying, in the people who are in the human studies, can you see this? Can you see what they're doing, what they're finding? It's going to be a better treatment than an antidepressant for somebody who is especially been around the sun 30 years, 30 years and older, that you have a metabolic disorder that's causing your brain not to be able to do what it's supposed to do. And what I think needs to be delivered to the frontline policymakers is, I don't know how this is going to unfold, but I am so stinking excited to share what I know with the next classroom starting in 2 weeks and to deliver that education to a patient that they might go teach their own doctor. That's how we teach physicians, is patients shock the heck out of their doctors. That's what's happened with the ketogenic diet. We have some ideas of how we might be able to help patients get connected with either the first couple of doses, and then watch what happens. Go barter to your doctor how those medications could be dramatically helpful in getting Larry back to where, Larry's journey is perfect. It's exactly what God needed him to do, which is in that journey, he found a group of really strong support mentors that he's been growing spiritually with. And his health, he has the knowledge. I think his spiritual growth and his metabolic growth are going to be on fire in 2025. And I know that if I was running his healthcare, that if he needed help, I would know exactly what to do to help him. And it's not the education. He's already had that. When I look at the missed steps that I hear about taking out red dye, and red dye isn't great. But it's the minor leagues. What metabolic dysfunction happens in patients is because of excess insulin, which is from those processed foods. And by putting people on healthy foods, we get a lot of people better. But that's not most people over the age of 50. They'll get on healthy foods and they're going to plateau within that week. And I am so excited for how well I have been able to learn from the students in my class, that this next class gets to learn even more. And that if you could put in pencil and paper, what does that look like in RFK's policymaking wish book? It's that you have to restore a community to these health problems. You cannot have Larry doing it in private all by himself. The loneliness will win. It is too difficult to do all by themselves. And when we put you in this classroom, you get put in a group. And it is in those friendships, in those moments of sharing the vulnerable parts, the truth talking that happens when you've abused food, or you just can't seem to get past this step without somebody exempling it for you. Oh, that's mankind. That's us since the beginning of time, that in a community, you can learn that. And in today's healthcare, I close that exam room door and I keep a secret. That's what happens in the medical practice because of all the rules. And I don't mean that you should be telling other people's stories. I just mean it's become so isolated that it feels like Groundhog's Day for every doctor to say, I tell the same thing over and over and over again. I've written lifestyle changes to thousands of patients, and I roll my eyes when I do it, because you can't just say this in a prescription. You have to get in the mud. You have to get dirty and get messy in the process of teaching and transforming people's brains. And that is what we do in this class. And I think the best thing I can do to make America healthy again is conduct this class twice a year. We have about 24 seats left. We close the cart on Friday, or when those 24 seats get sold between here and Friday. And I have very exciting things that we're going to talk about inside the class that I can't talk about on YouTube. But there's a couple more stories that I was going to share on this, but I'm looking at the time, and I know that there are some pretty good questions that are coming today that I want you asking questions. That we put this out on our Neurons page, the folks that we have a private page for anybody who's taken a class from us. And we said, put out the questions that you would want answered tonight. So there's a few over there. Before I do that, let's go over to this website and say, yes, if you are looking for the 21 day, you go to Dr. Boz, go to the courses and click on 21 day metabolic kick. There's a video there that tells you all about it. And that does get you a lot of information. The other thing that I said last week, and I wanted to make sure to clarify, under Dr. Boz favorites, there is the continuous glucose monitor. And I did speak correctly. I said, hey, this continuous glucose monitor, we had a whisper that this might happen, that when the prescriptions go out, insurance companies have been covering them. We can't guarantee that, and we're not going to mess with that. But if your insurance company covers it, even without the diagnosis of diabetes. Why is that? Because they have the message that when you know your blood sugar, when you know how important that information is, you get healthier. You know, the other thing that I heard this morning in our support group was that a nurse from Tampa was here, and she said something that I have heard from other people, but I just don't have enough prescribing prescriptions to know this firsthand, that when she takes Zepbound, so she takes one of these GLP-1s, GIPs, one with 2 hormones in it, and her insurance covered it. She did not have to pay a thing. So once she got the prescription, her insurance company was able to cover it. And I know that there's a whole bunch of changes that are on the docket for these drugs, especially from compounding pharmacies. And we're trying to keep up to speed with all of that. We'll talk more about that inside the class. But I was super, it was just a nice affirmation to hear somebody from the wild telling me, yes, that prescription is being covered by insurance companies for people without diabetes. In the past, the only people that could be covered for were the people with diabetes. Now, I contend that the best answer for some of these people who are stuck, who have a metabolism that is sluggish or slow, like the case I talked about last week, like Larry's case, is you have a bed of ketones and you just need a microdose of this to make a massive difference. And then once that endocrine system is functioning again, they back off and they do not regain the weight. They really do feel, and you can't guarantee that. There's a future to be written with these, but I'm impressed. A couple other announcements. I do speak at Low Carb Boca next week. If you're headed to Boca, please meet me there. I spent 15 hours this past week on my my lecture. And I will tell you, I checked my blood sugar at the beginning of the live, but I forgot to show you. I'll tell you that my ketones this morning were about 4 and my glucose was down to 44, but it's high because I've been doing this all day long. I've been prepping for my first screening colonoscopy tomorrow. So I'm so happy to make it through this show without having to run to the toilet. Welcome to being in your 50s. I know I'm a little late. You're supposed to get it at 50 years old. And I said I would do it when my husband did it. And I finally talked him into it. That is what happily married looks like. All right. Karen Lee says, how much allulose is equal to the minimum dose of GLP-1 medications? It is a great question. So Karen Lee, I think, they did this in rat studies. And if I remember right, I think it was like 32 tablespoons. That's a lot. And that might have been the average dose that they were on. But I will tell you that those mice were insulin resistant. When I see, I mean, they were on carb stuff. They didn't cut the carbs. They had a whole bunch of things that in the process of using allulose. So for those of you that, I'll catch you up, allulose has this, has a mimicking effect of a GLP-1. If you have a continuous glucose monitor on, your blood glucose will drop when you put in that sugar substitute. So there's a sweetness to it, but because of the chemical structure of it and how it mimics GLP-1s, you can see that the first time I took allulose, I thought it gave me a tummy ache. What I was really feeling was I called it nauseous, but I was just repulsed by food, which is essentially what happens when you're on GLP-1s. So even though the studies say that something like 30 tablespoons to equal the average dose of allulose, when I look at the impact, I look at how healthy their endocrine system is. And I tell patients, listen for it. Even just a couple of teaspoons in their coffee in the morning. I don't like sweetness in my coffee anymore. I used to do that, but so long I've trained myself to say, no, there's a place for sweetness and it's not in my coffee. But I have lots of folks who said, I just started putting it in my coffee and my coffee tastes good and I have it in the morning. And then I am not hungry for like hours into the day. And their blood sugar sinks. So their A1Cs come down, their uric acid was coming down. All of these markers of improved health had come down. So don't put in 32 tablespoons, put in a couple of teaspoons, and then get to the point where you can feel that, and I'm putting this in quotes, nausea, that sense that food doesn't sound like a good idea. So that's how I dose that. Good question. Okay, let's go to the second one. Jana says, our son has long COVID and major brain fog, chronic fatigue for 3 years now. Our family is broken. Anyone out there know how to help? So I'll tell you that when I look at long COVID, and I have lots of patients with this, not lots, but I have enough patients where the long COVID is essentially, it's essentially what my mother had. So first of all, if you haven't read the book Any Way You Can, or the audiobook of it, Any Way You Can, first word spelled all one word, Any Way You Can, her cancer was of the T cells, of these special kind of white blood cells, and they were broken. 5,000 were broken, and there'd be one healthy one that shows up. That's what my mother's cancer was. She had 6 months to live because she said, I'm not doing your chemo again. You can take you and your Western medicine and throw it in the ditch because I am not doing this again. And when her ketogenic diet, one of the first impacts of a ketogenic diet for everybody, but because the half-life of a white blood cell is so short, when the bone marrow has ketones, the ketones are everywhere in your body. It's a chemistry set that you're applying to their bodies. You've got to be in a state of ketosis in order to shift the chemistry. So, the shifted chemistry caused their white blood cells to be more powerful. Her white blood cells too. The first thing her symptoms were is she was needing an antibiotic every week just to keep the infections from spreading. I remember at one time she had a pimple on her nose. It was like Rudolph. It was so awful, tender, sore, and any antibiotic in the world. I'm like, you can lance it, but it's not in. There's not a pus in there. It's just this induration of infection that's smoldering under the skin, and that's what happens when immune systems don't work right. Long COVID is another one. The immune system just cannot get past the rise that's supposed to happen after you have a cytokine response from your immune system. And the cytokines are just souping through things. I won't go through that whole thing here, but it really does. The best way I've seen people get out of the long COVID is they were in a persistent state of ketosis. And I mean ketones of 2.0 and higher for 3 weeks before they slacked off. It's difficult. I wouldn't be able to do it without sardines. I would have to eat sardines practically for the whole 3 weeks because any other food I like too much and I would eat too much. That's one of my recommendations. All right. Dawn says, can you use GLP-1 and keto together? Yeah, I think that's the beautiful part that I see is And I mean, I think it just speaks to a year ago, I was telling you, this is terrible. Don't do that. Let your body heal. And although I still want you to begin with the education, because if you just put GLP-1 in an insulin-resistant patient, the drug becomes their endocrine system. We want your endocrine system to be ready to go, to have that power. And that's the pulsing of this hormone. And I don't mean a big dose. I mean a micro dose allows that pulsations to begin, and they really do heal. They resurge. It's like priming the endocrine system. And if there's one like summary of what do I think ketosis, a ketogenic diet, and GLP-1s do, is that they resurrect a metabolism. That metabolism can be in the brain. I have some incredible brain stories that I think deserve to be told, but it's a little too early to do that on a YouTube channel. I also think that, like Larry and many people that have Larry's similar story, which is they were better, their metabolism was working, but the pathology that was riddling through his body needed to be cleaned up. And to sweep out the autophagy, I mean, he needed perfect performance for longer than I've been able to get a person to do it. I can get them in a ketogenic state. I can show them how to burst ketones, but to push them at a higher level to be persistent, that's what Larry needed. That's what I think the gal from last week who had the stroke needed. All right, let's keep going. We have several more of these. Betty says, will you be using GLP-1s in class? This is to be determined. I think there's a really high chance that there's a bunch of rules changing on these prescriptions. So I'm trying to be careful of what the rules will be at the time the class is over. But I'm hoping there's a really good benefit for being a student in this class. I'm going to try to be very careful not to say anything more than that. I just was very encouraged by not just having one or two patients be able to get it covered by insurance, but somebody from the wild have it covered by their insurance as well. I have mentioned several times that when you look at some of the ways you can use your medical license, there are prescription mills out there. Google getting a GLP-1 prescription, and you got plenty of people that are doing that. What I find happening is they lead with, and this is where RFK has it right. They lead the prescription mills lead with the drug, and then they expect you to figure out the teaching on your own. And I won't do that anymore. I mean, I've tried that. This works way better. You are free. You don't need me. You are healthy enough and educated enough that you can teach your doctor. That's amazing. That's amazing. So we start by this intense education, and we hope to make it a benefit for anybody that comes in. If you have ever met me and know my real soul, I am inappropriately generous, and I just think God has called me to be the best teacher I can be. Distracting by going to RFK's inauguration party. First of all, I was never going to convince him of policy at that party anyway. And if I'm meant to be part of that influence, I know the opportunity will come again, and I will keep doing what I'm supposed to do right here. All right, next question. So Rex says, oopsie daisy, I didn't mean to do that. Rex says, I've dialed down the protein and up the fat, and my ketones have risen greatly. What should I do? All right. So first of all, the best part of Rex's answer is he's measuring. Good job. This is a very common problem I find in insulin-resistant patients is they... The state of ketosis, ketones beget ketones. And you can look at that fat to protein ratio and really, I mean, especially for my patients with Parkinson's, with, cognitive issues, like their memory is starting to fail. Getting ketones higher is only accomplished by making sure the fat was higher and the protein they cut down on. When you say, is this sustainable? What do I do next? Looking at volume, that's the part that I would have you cut down next. try 2 days. I'd love it if you did 3 days of sardines. I know what your metabolism will do at the end of 3 days. Just looking that, because sardines have a lot of protein in them. And I don't want people cutting down protein so much that they can't support the sustained replacement of their muscle mass. I want you doing it in a ketogenic state though. So you first hit the ketones and then you start to say, can I add back protein and not have so much fat? And usually what we see is the volume of food will need to change. The other part that I always warn people is if you're eating late at night, and you've had insulin resistance, it's a no-go. Your body is so programmed to overproduce insulin in those evening hours that even when they're eating straight fat, straight butter at bedtime, you should not be doing that. Stop that habit. That's a problem. And we really work on that in the class too. All right. Dale says, how long do I need to be on a GLP-1 to stimulate autophagy? We think the autophagy is within about 3 days that you could make that happen and again, you're looking for a rise in the ketones and a drop in the blood sugar. When we get that autophagy, I think a Dr. Boz ratio of 40, I'm really confident they're in autophagy. A Dr. Boz ratio of 80, depending on the chronicity of their health. Again, these are estimates. There's a cellular thing that you can measure in research to say autophagy, not autophagy, but just based on the histories and the progression of improvement that we've seen, that Dr. Boz ratio is there. When you use a GLP-1, so if you're in a ketogenic state, you're using the keto continuum and you've got a pretty good sense that you burst ketones a couple times a week, I try to boost them at least once a week. That's why I do it on the show and say, this is what I'm hitting. And I've been hurricane homeless. I don't have a kitchen, so I'm losing weight because I am not eating in the evening hours because I don't have a kitchen. And I'll tell you, it's really easy to boost my ketones in this state. When people add a GLP-1 or an incretin, their stimulus to eat is just dropped. It's just so strikingly affected that they tuck down the volume. And as long as they were in ketosis before they started the GLP-1, it's really easy to predict how much they'll need. I think a better question might have been, how long do I need to be on GLP-1s once I see that they're working? And we've had people as little as 2 months and say, I want to see what it's like without it. And we haven't heard back from them in 4 months. So they're doing well or they found somebody else to write the prescription. So again, it's really new to the equation. And I'm going to be able to answer that better next year as opposed to this year. All right, next question. Becky writes in and says, what can I do about eating too much protein? I have been keto for over a year and have 30 pounds left of fat to lose. I am still have a fat phobia. I guess I don't know what else it could be. So yeah, Becky, one of the places where when I see people get on a ketogenic diet and you saw those slides kind of progress through, they're down to 2 meals or 2 boluses of food a day. They have their eating window 8 hours, slide it closer to sunrise, and even cut that eating window down to 6 hours. When I see them stuck with that 30 or less, it's the volume of food that we're working on. And you can translate that to saying calories. But I think that statement loses some of the context. We want volume of food less. So yes, there will be less calories, but the amount of food needs to be suppressed. It's the kind of thing, especially if you've been doing keto for 3 years and you've got the final 30 left, use an incretin. That's what I'd tell you to do. Rita says, what is the difference between a 3-day water fast and a 3-day sardine fast? And are there different benefits? So yeah, you saw that on my slides, that a sardine fast, first of all, you don't have to conquer this big boogeyman of not eating. I'm prepping for a colonoscopy tomorrow, which is why my blood sugar isn't what it was earlier today, because I'm mixing Miralax with Gatorade. But the big boogeyman that usually people face when they prep for a colonoscopy is they're not going to eat for a day or whatever. And I think, oh yeah, I've long past gotten over that. But I remember the first time and I thought, how does anyone do this? This is crazy. And once you get past it, you're like, okay, I didn't die. The human body is clearly made to figure this out. But I don't minimize how difficult the first time is. I also know that there are many of my insulin-resistant patients that they would have to fast for close to 10 days before their ketones would start to rise. I mean, what happens is they shut down, they have no calories. Their blood sugar starts out at like 150 and then it goes to 110 and 120 and then it'll hang out about 95 to 105 for like 5 days. And they are just emptying glycogen from their muscle cells and their liver over and over. I mean, they just have buckets of it. And so the blood sugar never gets to the part where it stimulates a ketone production. But that fasting is way too long. It blows my mind that anybody could do it. So when I've seen people who just said, I really do recommend a 36-hour water fast for anybody. It's a good habit practice that is the beginning stages of a tool that you will probably need in your lifetime. But a sardine fast gets that low volume, gets that high fat, high protein, and the satiety is really easy to feel when you're having sardines. So that the food noise becomes less. And so I just find that it is a baby step, but sometimes it's the only step, meaning an insulin-resistant patient should not go to a water fast, especially if they're not keto adapted. If their body isn't making ketones already and they stop all food, that first slope down to getting to a state of ketosis could be over a week away. And that's just, you're going to lose way too much muscle mass. I never recommend a fast longer than 72 hours. I think there's way smarter ways to do it than that. And you get most of the growth hormone, most of the stuff that people are, trying to get that enlightenment, that euphoria that happens in a fast. If you have a hearty metabolism, if you have a metabolism that it's fat adapted, you're going to feel that by 72 hours. You're not going to get a better one on 3 days in, or 4 days in, 5 days in, 6 days in. Stick with 72 hours, repeat it several times because you will notice by the third or fourth one that the euphoria is, the epinephrine effect is much better. So it's a muscle that you do work out. All right, so good job with that one. Luminita, what do you think about the bariatrics versus Ozempic? Which one is less dangerous in terms of side effects? Yeah, great question. A million times I'm going to vote for Ozempic. The GLP-1s are a hormone that manipulates what your brain is suffering with. I mean, one of the reasons that people gain back the weight after they have part of their body cut out is that they missed the step of training how to think about this process. And you'll see that these surgeons go through education plan and group therapy and documenting and all the things of trying to teach what we teach in this class, which is how do you understand what your body's metabolism is doing in the moment and how do you plan for the next 24 hours? I mean, the saddest part about the gastric bypasses is, there are some malabsorption issues that you never get back. You can never get back the cells that are designed to absorb iron, to absorb B12. And you have to be on them for a lifetime. Like, you can't take a break. This is what your body requires you to have it put in your body because you can no longer absorb it from your food. And of course, I see with a ketogenic diet how much improvement we get in the gut membrane, that microbiome and the slime layer of your gut, of your bowels, gets way better as time goes on with the ketogenic diet. When they add those small doses of incretins, the volume of food goes down and their state of ketosis goes higher. So autophagy just happens faster. Good question. All right. I think we have we have a couple left. Sherry says, what should a 1-year keto consider for dehydration when salt, magnesium, electrolytes, chia seeds, probiotics, stool softeners, 120 ounces of water daily haven't completely resolved it? Fasting worsens it. Okay. So you think you're dehydrated and you've tried all of these things to make it better. fasting would worsen it. So, I mean, I would be super careful that you're not on a medication that lowers blood pressure. There is a syndrome called POTS syndrome where the regulation of sustaining blood pressure is not normal. It often happens when they've been insulin resistant for a long time, when they have a lot of inflammatory processes happening. And it's part of this parasympathetic message, meaning the body's response to keep blood pressure at a certain level. It doesn't work right. I would have that looked into by your doctor. Yeah. And fasting would worsen that. And all of these things aren't going to do much for the dehydration. And I think the dehydration isn't what you're feeling, the lightheadedness, the syncope, the wooziness when you stand up, and you're calling it dehydration. That's what I'm guessing by that statement. And I would look into a syndrome called POTS syndrome. My glucose average in the morning is 90. My ketones for the past week have been, wow, that's really good, much higher than previous weeks. Is this normal? One morning it was 4.4. I have an eating window from 10 to 4. So I often see a boost in ketones when people change things. So if you go back to those slides that I showed you earlier and you say those ketones rise, and again, 2.5 to 3 is really robust. But usually that comes with a change in something you're doing. They added sauna. They took the eating window and narrowed it. They moved it towards sunrise. All of those are a metabolic stimulus. And, the keto continuum is really a stepwise way of saying, let me improve your metabolism to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And some people don't need to get all the way to the 72 hours of fasting. Their body got healthy when they were on step 5, and good riddance, good job. Don't just do it to suffer. Instead, looking closer at the answers of what did you change for your metabolism? All right, so I'm going to post something in the chat right now, which is a playlist. There are a few people that I took an interview from, and this playlist is unpublished. So, you can get to it through this link, but it's not out there in the wild. So the only way you can get to it is to click on this playlist. And it talks about how the 21-day works. Again, I can't tell you how thankful I am for you guys tuning in every Tuesday. Please pray for my colonoscopy tomorrow, and know that, and then pray for my husband's the following day. But I really think that my job is to teach and to show you how I would make you healthy again. And I can't do that if you don't show up, tune in. I look forward to an awesome year of 2025. We have some great ideas as we launch into our biggest season for us, which is the 21-day. Class starts in 2 weeks and the cart closes on Friday, or if we fill all 200 slots before then. We'll see you next week, everybody.